Well, Fred, I want to thank you for joining me today to do this interview. And for those of you that are watching this, Fred Richards is an IT manager for a large corporation and has worked in this capacity for a number of years. And I'm just thrilled to have this chance to talk with you and learn a little bit more about what you do. So why don't we start with my first question, which is tell us a little bit about your current occupation and your career path.
Okay. My current occupation, as you said, is an IT manager, and what I do is more of an information systems side rather than an infrastructure side, meaning the infrastructure is hardware and networking and computers and servers. I'm more on the software side, the application side. So enterprise resource planning systems is something that I work in, ERP systems as they're known, common ones being SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle. Those are big ERP systems. So I work with stuff like that, and I specialize in something called EDI, which is electronic data interchange, which is a business-to-business format to where different businesses trade transactions such as purchase orders and invoices, and they do it electronically.
Gotcha. And so in that capacity, you also run into in bringing other people, even within your organization, right, to get different projects done. Is that correct? Yeah,
a lot of my responsibilities are project management. So, maybe there's a new module, like a warehouse management module that we haven't implemented in our system, and we need to implement that. So I would be in charge of obtaining resources from third parties and scoping out the project and coming up with a project charter and a project plan and assigning resources and doing all that. So project management is a big part of my job, and it is a big part of that degree when you go into an information systems type degree. Be a big part of that.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your college background. Where did you go? What did you study? How did you decide that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, it's interesting because when I left high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. At one point, I was enrolled to go to Ohio State University, but I never started. I ended up just going to work. And through working, I decided I wanted to go into business management, mainly because I wanted to advance in the job that I had. I was a restaurant manager, and I wanted to do more with that. So I went into a business management degree. I'd been taking some general ed courses at community colleges and stuff up to that point. And I started at Wright State University near Dayton, Ohio, in a business management capacity. And then my job took me to Cincinnati, where I transferred to the University of Cincinnati, as a business management major. And while I was studying there, I took a programming class as an elective, just a computer programming class, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And there was just something about, writing this logic in the back end of the computer and then executing it and watching, your commands materialize on the screen. You start out writing a hello world program where you tell the computer to say hello world. And I loved it. And the professor encouraged me to consider pursuing information systems. They call it many things these days, but at the time it was a business-related IS degree, and programming was a big part of that, and that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up doing a double major at University of Cincinnati, information systems and business management, thinking that that would uniquely position me to communicate or bridge the gap in communication between the technical people in the IS department and the business people. And, that may or may not be true, but that's what I thought. And I ended up taking a job upon graduation at Cincinnati Bell Information Systems doing COBOL programming.
Oh, wow.
I was working on a billing system. It was a Cincinnati Bell. It was a telephone company, and I was writing programs that generated the big telephone bills for corporations. It was fine. I was on a test team. So when somebody writes the code, it has to go through a whole series of certification and testing. And I was on the testing team, which obviously I wanted to write the code, not test it. Eventually I left there and became a consultant. So as a consultant, I would go into one technology. Like I immediately went into Microsoft Visual Basic Programming. So I did a lot of work with that. And then there was a period of time where Lotus Notes, which you may or may not have heard of,
Yeah.
was the big thing. So I got educated in Lotus Notes and started building Lotus Notes applications. Then I went to Oracle ERP systems because there was a need for that. The thing about consulting is I got to learn a lot of little things. You know, I was how's that saying go? I was master of none.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Jack of all trades, master of none. That's what I became. And eventually I got out of consulting and went to work for a manufacturing company, and I've been there ever since. Now, in that period of time, there was a period in the economy where things went bad. Right after the year 2000, there was a lot of IT work, getting those systems ready for the year 2000 when everything was supposed to crash. And then immediately after that, the economy tanked. And so the companies weren't investing in, you know, training. So I couldn't pivot from Lotus Notes to Oracle to Microsoft anymore because they weren't training me. So I decided to go back to school. So I enrolled at Northern Kentucky University, and I got a master's degree there in what they call informatics now. And I had a specialization in ERP systems and did a lot of training on SAP there. And that's kind of how I ended up in this today. And then one of the big projects I started at this company in was implementing an EDI system. So now I've kind of become an EDI guy. So that's kind of how I went. I never really aspired to do this. I just stumbled upon it and found a love for it and developed that. And now I've gone from programmer to programmer analyst to systems analyst to senior systems analyst to IT manager.
Wow. So it's been a progression, an evolution that it sounds like has happened over time, not to mention with you picking up all these other tools, it's definitely helped you, hasn't it?
It has. It has. Okay. It's made me well-rounded.
Yeah. So tell me this, what do you love most about your job? I mean, is it still the programming?
I absolutely love the programming. I wish that I did more programming. Luckily, in my capacity, you know, the way that these corporations have gone these days is they run lean teams, you know, so we have to do much more with less. And so that calls on IT managers and system analysts to get their hands dirty, if you will, which is get into the technical stuff and writing code. I love to do that. To this day, that is what I like about this is getting my hands dirty. It's just the way that the business has pivoted. They found out that they could find people to write code offshore much cheaper. So the jobs to actually write code went away or didn't pay as well. So in this country, we kind of pivoted into systems analysts. So we would analyze the system. Someone would say, hey, I need the system to, I can't think of something offside, but they would come up with a requirement, a request. Here's something I want the system to do that it doesn't do today. So the systems analyst comes in and says, okay, here's how we do that. And we would write requirements and send them to the programmers, and the programmers would build stuff based on the technical and functional requirements that the systems analyst did. And we would oversee that. And then when the development or the programming work was done, it would come back to us and we would coordinate the testing. So we would test the programs standalone, and then we would incorporate them into the systems and let the business functional users run a series of tests on them to make sure that it does what they wanted them to do. And then we did not redundant testing. We had to test the existing systems to make sure something else didn't break. So we oversee all that testing, and then we oversee the implementation into the production system. So we all became analysts, and that's what we did. So it's one step above that. And part of the IS degree, when I went to University of Cincinnati, the capstone was 2 semesters of systems analysis, and that was the pinnacle of the degree. And in those 2 semesters, we were tasked to go out and find a client that wanted a system built, you know, something small. Usually it might be a professor or something at the school, but we would find that person, we would gather their requirements, we would write functional specifications, basically say how it's supposed to work, and then technical specifications that say how we're going to make it work that way. We would build the system, you know, the whole software development life cycle. That was the capstone of the IS degree, and that's
Wow.
what we did.
Wow, very interesting. So what I've heard you say is that there's lots of different types of analyst positions. I've heard of data analyst, you mentioned systems analyst and all that. I mean, so it sounds like there's lots of different parts to the whole process.
Yeah, and I've recently run across a job description called a data scientist
Hmm.
because data analysis and business intelligence is a big thing now. You know, you have, for example, Kroger has built a whole company that all they do is when you scan that Kroger card, they analyze what you spend, what you buy, and they just load every little bit of that, what locations you buy it in, you know, what coupons you use, every little scrap of data that they can, and they load it into these huge databases. And they have a company that sits there and tries to slice and dice that data to be able to market you more effectively and to interpret the market regionally more effectively. And they have what they call data scientists that try to figure out new and different ways to make that data turn into money for Kroger.
It's amazing how micro it can get, isn't it? I mean, the bottom line with what these companies can do with data harvesting and things. So I know
Yeah.
you talked about what you love to do. What's the thing that's the least enjoyable about your job?
For me, the stress, when you are in charge, as I am, of a large ERP system, it is the backbone of this company. So if something happens to that system, you know, in this particular company, we make grocery bags for Kroger and whatnot. We make bags for every business you can think of. And if that ERP, the whole system shuts down. So it's a lot of stress. And it's a situation where, you know, we carry a phone. Back in the day, it was probably a pager. Now it's a cell phone because we have to be able to be reached in the middle of the night if that system goes down and be able to get in there and fix it. And it's very stressful. I mean, no guts, no glory, right? There's supposedly a lot of, you know, pride in keeping that thing going and a lot of kudos, you know, when everything works the way it's supposed to, but it's also really bad when it doesn't because it shuts everything down. So,
So
it's
it's
very,
really,
very stressful.
yeah, very dependent upon you and being able to fix the problem quickly to get things back up and running, huh?
Yeah, and you know, you have to rely on good people and building good teams and having good vendors and resources to call on because, you know, these systems are huge, huge. And as a manager of one of these systems, I do not know how every single nut and bolt and sprocket fits in place and how every line of code executes. I just don't. There's no way. So I have to be able to know when I don't know what to do, who to call that does know what to do and get a hold of them quickly.
Wow, gotcha. You truly are the conductor of making sure that all the pieces are zipping along easily. So if you could do it all over again, Fred, would you still go to the same college you attended and still pursue the same degree and career path that you pursued?
Of the colleges I went to, I did not dislike any of them. I thought Wright State was fantastic. You know, I thought University of Cincinnati is my favorite. I absolutely loved the University of Cincinnati. And when my daughter decided she wanted to go there, I couldn't have been happier, mainly because it gave me an opportunity to return to the campus a few times. Loved it. And I loved NKU as well. And that's a real up and coming college, but I loved them all. But University of Cincinnati is my favorite. I wouldn't change a thing about where I went to. Now, on a career path, I don't know if I would change. I'm not really a regret kind of guy, but I might have specialized in something, like maybe specialized in SAP, because if I had a certain level of expertise in all aspects of an SAP system, you know, I could probably make more money than I do as a manager just doing consulting work in SAP if you know that system well.
Wow.
I'm kind of specializing in EDI, so I'm kind of building a niche for myself there. And in my current job, they are now in the process of making me full-time, specializing as an EDI manager and taking me out of the ERP system, because that need for business-to-business communication is huge. You know, they want our customers to be able to put in an order in their system and to have that transmit and show up as an order in our system. So when they put a purchase order in and they hit submit, that comes over the network into our system as an order, and we don't have to hire a bunch of people to key that stuff in. And that also eliminates a lot of error from that manual keying. So it's faster and it's less error prone, and it's just more efficient all around. We get paid faster and everything. So that's a big deal. And it's an older technology, but it's tried and true. It's standardized and everybody uses it. And the more you do use it, the more efficient you are. So that's what my thing is. And what I kind of like about it is it has a lot of diversity in it. So, you know, one of the things I liked in my education was database administration and structured query language, which is called SQL. I like working with databases in SQL. I get to do a lot of that in what I do because the back ends of the systems I work on have a database. They all have databases, so I like to work with that. I get to write some programming because there is something called mapping in here, where you have to say, when, you know, Kroger sends me data, it doesn't look like the data in our system, so we have to take that data and map it to look like the data in our system, and there's some programming involved there. So I get a little hands-on with that, and there's some networking involved. I work with value-added networks and communication protocols, you know, FTP servers, AS2 servers, encryption, all that kind of stuff. So I get to do a lot of different things in that role. But if I had to do it again, I might specialize in something, pick an area. The one thing, no, I won't say that. Sorry, Dan.
That's all right. So,
I was going to take a jab at your son, but I won't.
Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, because obviously he's doing something totally different. Again, in a computer-related side of things, and just for clarification standpoint, my son does computer auditing and also SOX testing,
Yes.
which is a whole another beast. You know, that people either like or don't like, right? As we talked about.
It's extremely important. It's
Yeah.
extremely important because one of my pet peeves in our environment now is, you know, how can we be this technologically advanced and not have a system to vote with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to have a system with to vote with, the most important thing to everyone is that it's going to function correctly. It's going to count one vote for one person, and you need the auditors and the SOX people to go in there and ensure that those results are validated correctly. And, you know, SOX was made up because people were doing the little thing like in Office Space where they were writing side programs to skim the fractions of a cent off. And this was all designed to make sure that none of that kind of stuff happened, and that, you know, everything, it works the way it's supposed to. And, you know, the financial data that is reported is correct. It's not inflated, all the math's right, and all that's very important. So that is another very important information related field.
Yeah.
Now, when you're on the other side of that, getting audited all the time, sometimes it's unpleasant, but I will not deny the importance of it.
Yeah. So, hey, what final advice would you give to a student who's considering going into a similar profession or a similar degree program in the future, based on kind of where you've been, but also where you see things going in the future, Fred?
Well, you know, programming and database administration, all that hands-on stuff I love is an important aspect of it, and you need to learn it. If you want to do more of that kind of stuff, I would probably suggest going into computer science. If you want to have a business bent to what you're doing and administer these systems and do some of the stuff that I told you, then by all means, I would go this route. I want to emphasize the importance of project management and organization. So you need to have those skills, and you will get those skills in this if you pursue this path. But you also need to be a self-starter. You can't wait around for somebody, when you go into these rules to kind of tell you what to do. You need to be hungry. You need to have that kind of an investigative kind of mentality, because you're going to be doing a lot of problem solving, a lot of troubleshooting, and you just need to have that motivation in you to go do it and not wait for somebody else. You have to be able to be a self-starter.
That's huge advice, because what you're basically saying, because I talk about this with my students all the time, there are those that are inactive, reactive, and proactive. And you're saying in this role, you got to be proactive. You've got to be willing to jump in there and fix it. And probably there's a lot of roles like that within the computer or the IT industry that require that, I would assume.
Yeah, 100% proactive, because these roles are competitive. They're very competitive, because these companies are trying to do more with less. And so that does make information systems important, because, for lack of a better term, the better our systems are, the lower the head count they can have.
Mm-hmm.
But on these teams, if you can't be a go-getter and proactive, then when the reorganization or reduction in workforce comes along, you want to be the guy that they come to, not the guy that they say we can do without.
Wow.
And that's a harsh reality of business right now, but it is a reality. These companies constantly reorganize and reduce workforce. And if you're not proactive, then you're going to be the one on the cutting floor.
And I guess it's fair to say in any industry, but in this industry as well, you got to keep up with the trends, right? As you're seeing new things coming out, it wouldn't hurt to go back to school and get re-educated about new opportunities, so that you're constantly in the forefront of what's going on, right?
Absolutely. And that would be something I would urge when you are seeking employment. Does your employer invest in retooling you as need be? When these trends change, are they going to invest in your up with it? That's a good thing to have, but that's another part of being proactive. You have to keep up with the industry and the trends. And if you have to go and invest in some classes at NKU or a graduate degree or some certification in SAP or EDI, and your employer's not going to pay for it, that's part of keeping yourself marketable and relevant. It's tough these days. You know it, everybody knows it, and everyone needs to be ready for it. And, I can't stress that enough. I just can't. Hard work, proactive, that's the key.
It all pays off in the end.
It's very challenging. It's very challenging area to go into, computers and information system. It's very rewarding though. Even my son, who's taken a job of programming, he says it's the hardest thing he's ever done, but he loves it.
Wow.
Because he goes on there and he writes these programs and plugs it into a website and then goes in there and interacts with it, enters things in fields and presses buttons, and the programs that he writes executes things on the screen. And if you want to get really fancy, you could look into video gaming, if you wanted to be really technical and see some cool stuff. I'd imagine that is extremely competitive.
Yeah.
Like, you better be very good at what you do if you want to go into that, because in the back of those games, there is a base that's tracking, all your achievements and everything that you've accomplished in the game, so it remembers where you were. Same as these systems. There's a database back in there, database here. And there's programs that dictate what occurs on the screen when you put the input in through your controller or your keyboard.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, but I guess you got to have that kind of logical mind, because when you start getting into programming, it's all logic, no faith here. It's all logic. You have to write it in there and make it happen.
Right. Because if you don't, it's going to crash and burn, and then somebody's not going to be happy.
Oh, and it will crash or burn. That's part of building the integrity and wisdom in this industry is, making a few mistakes, and they will be made.
Yeah.
I can tell you, at University of Cincinnati, in that programming class, I sat in that programming lab till the sun came up, because I had a program that would not work. It crashed and burned every time I ran it. And I sat there, and this is a good lesson too. because at some point I went to the guy that was running the computer lab. You know, they usually have a student volunteer that's usually an IT student that's kind of watching things.
Yeah.
And I said, look, man, I have been working on this thing for 8 hours and it's the same error. I can't figure it out. And what he found out was if you scrolled all the way off the screen to the right, there was one comma that got typed in there by mistake.
Wow.
I spent 8 hours on there. And the lesson is, don't sit there for 8 hours and try to figure it out. Learn how to ask for help. You know, rely on those resources, like I said earlier.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Fred, I can't thank you enough for taking this time to allow me to interview you today. And all of this advice is just fantastic for me to be able to share with students in the future. So thank you for this. You know, we just really, really appreciate it. I know all the students are going to appreciate hearing all your words of advice. So thank you.
Yeah. We are the rock stars of the business world, man. What can I say?
I love that. And we'll end on
nerds. Now we're rock stars.
Well, thank you again, Fred. I appreciate it.